Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of something we started, or series, something we started last week, myself and Marco. So we are men of our word. So we are here again with another controversial topic. That's the plan going forward. We like to talk things that others don't, and that's the way going forward. So for today's session, it's not just us. We are four today. Marco will brief you on our guests. I think they're going to add a lot of bubbles, so stay around. The topic is something that you need to listen to. It's the Great Stitch Up. If you don't know what it is, stay with that. If you are intrigued, I think it's a good reason to be with us. There is a massive confluence between powers, and that's something we're going to discuss. What powers they are, we will tell you. One of them, as you can see on the thumbnail, is the so-called Palestinian flag. Whatever is that, it's something that it's all over the place. Like here in Ireland, I see more Palestinian flags than Irish, which is something that it's weird to say the least. Marco will also announce an award that we will attribute on a weekly basis. For today, we already decided who is the lucky one, but going forward, we're going to count on your input. So this is something that we would like to be interactive. The chat box is open, so if you have comments, questions, concerns, whatever you want to throw, we are more than welcome to receive. So I pass the ball to Marco, and he will take us to next steps.
A very good evening to everyone. Thank you, Vitor. Today we have the great privilege of having two illustrious guests, Niram Ferretti from Italy, a political commentator and analyst, and Erez Mudai, an international business lawyer whose services I can thoroughly recommend. And they're going to be discussing the title of which is in the description box. Anyway, this evening, what are we going to do? We're going to examining what lies behind the so-called Palestinian cause, representing a people whom up until 60 years ago, nobody had ever heard of. How has Palestinism seeped increasingly into the public consciousness? Could there be a confluence of actors and forces bent not only upon the destruction of the state of Israel, but also intent on undermining the social fabric and political order of Western civilization as a whole? Could Palestinism be a smokescreen for these pernicious and subversive forces? We'll be exploring this in The Great Stitch Up, okay, where we see a series of oblique alliances and tacit understandings that have come into play. And we see a number of actors, a politicized judiciary, a series of NGOs, perverse political processes, the so-called Oslo process, which was foisted upon the Israeli people first and foremost. And we see academia, one mustn't forget academia, of course. Universities throughout the world have in fact become sausage machines, turning out people without any critical sense, any capacity to analyze situations, and when they are placed before facts, they put up the force field. Now, speaking about sausages, we have instituted a prize which we shall award on a weekly basis to a person who has let's say encapsulated moral, political, or intellectual sausagery. Okay, and it is the first and foremost we are going to inaugurate this with somebody who has encapsulated this in recent weeks, namely Sir Keir Starmer, the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, who has worked tirelessly for the liberation of sausages. Okay, so credit where credit's due. Okay, we shall be doing this on a weekly basis. Here's our man, the master sausage maker. Okay, who has caused a lot of havoc already in his brief tenure. So for this week. We've instituted this prize, and he is the honorary recipient for this week. Going ahead, here it is, this beautiful sausage on a plinth. Okay, in the coming weeks we'll have new candidates. Okay, and we'll also ask for your input. Now, without further ado, let's delve into this issue, Palestinism, all the various actors involved in this curious ideology which has seeped into the consciousness of the Western world, the collectivity of the Western world, and indeed, I would say, corrupted it and ruined generations of minds. Okay? So it is without further ado, I'm going to introduce Erez Modai, and he's going to take it up from here.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you, gentlemen, for having me. Can I put on my presentation? There it is. Okay. Can I see the presentation itself, not the slide? Okay, I'll talk. I'll manage. Let's talk for just a few minutes about Palestine before Zionism. Palestine before Zionism was deserted and neglected by the Ottomans, whom Churchill called the sick man of Europe. The country was vacant. It had bandits, it had nomads, it had few walled cities, in all of which Jews lived. That included Jaffa, Jerusalem, of course, Hebron, and, to the surprise of many, Gaza as well. In the middle of the 19th century, the Scottish painter David Roberts toured the country, and what he saw, he painted, and you can get the impression from these two paintings about how desolate the country was, how vacant. Actually, these two paintings are the vicinity of Jerusalem. No towns in the background, no villages, no agriculture, no nothing. So if we can, I'll go to the next slide. Now, in the 1880s, the Zionism started to crystallize, and Jewish immigration brought into Palestine manpower, initiative, money, investments, a banking system, skills, know-how, technology, industry, transportation, agriculture, postal service, etc., etc., etc. And suddenly it became a place to be. Suddenly it became a place where there's commerce, there's business, there's work, there are jobs. And mind you, most of the immigration to Israel or to the land of Israel was of intellectuals, educated people, doctors, engineers, technicians, what have you, because Jews have always valued education and knowledge. As a direct consequence, there was mass Arab labor migration that followed Zionism. People came to work in the land of Israel from all over the region, as far away as the Sudan. I'm talking about what is today Sudan, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. Now, currently, all of those territories are Arab states and have been from the, most of them from the mid to the late 40s. But when these people came, they were just territories. And their entry into Palestine was unregulated and undocumented. There was no charge, there was no keeping tabs, and the majority of those people came to the land of Israel in 1946 to 1948, the year the State of Israel was found. Now, following the First World War, the region was carved by the French and the British to two mandates. The A represents the French mandate, and B represents the British mandate over Palestine and what was called the District of Mosul, which is mainly Iraq. But you can get the impression and understand that when people talked about Palestine, they talked about both what is Israel today and Jordan, or it was called, or as it was called before, Transjordan. Now, Jews and Arabs immigrated mostly involuntarily throughout the region. Altogether, according to one UN report from 1947, as few as 472,000 Arab refugees fled from what was then becoming Israel. But this number includes people who never visited Palestine. They just wanted the humanitarian aid given by the UN, so they identified as Arabs who were in Palestine and lost their home there. This figure also includes people who made multiple registration. They basically earned more living by migrating from one refugee camp to another and registering sometimes under different names in order to get more, even more aid. Now, when the State of Israel was founded, there was a surge in nationalistic activity in all the Arab territories. Some of them gradually became countries. And over the 40s and 50s, some 850,000 to 1 million Jews were expelled from those Arab states. And they were expelled after October 7 type events that included murders and persecution and rapes and state-censored confiscation of property and eventually expulsion. So these people were robbed of all the assets and property they and their ancestors were able to amass in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, and wherever have you, where Jews were very successful as merchants, as doctors, as bankers sometime. And all of these people, up to 1 million people, were absorbed in Israel, and they were never compensated. This basically means that if you zoom out, you see that there was a population exchange that was 2-to-1 in favor of Arabs, meaning they got rid of twice the number of Jews than Arabs that fled Palestine as a result of the war waged on the State of Israel, as I will shortly explain. Now, who are the Palestinians? Here is a New York Times heading title from December 4th, 1945, that says Arabs to boycott Palestinian goods. What Palestinian goods? And the answer is that when they said Palestinian goods, both the Arabs and the New York Times referred to Jewish industries and Zionism, meaning Jews living in the land of Israel. That what was boycotted, and that was referred to at the time as Palestinians, not the Arab, the Jews. And Consequently, I have some doubts about the term Palestinians because Palestinian as an Arab nationality was only invented in 1964 by the Egyptian-born arch-terrorist Yasser Arafat. He himself was not Palestinian. It was just his business to monger war and terror in the Palestinian or what was then called Arab refugees in Jordan. And he invented the term in Jordan when at the time the population was 80% Palestinian aliens, so-called, and only 20% proper Jordanian civilians, citizens. Palestine's flag was the same as Jordan's flag, only Yasser Arafat scratched out one star that the Jordanian flag had and made it not into the Palestinian flag, but as the flag of the PLO terrorist organization. So this basically brings us to the mid-60s with some, let's say, not a proportion, but a way of understanding the situation. Palestinians came following Zionism. Some of them came for a short while. Some of them were, I'm missing a slide. Okay. Some of them didn't even get to Palestine. They only registered as refugees. And as Jordan and other Arab countries kept them as refugees, did not accept them as citizens, they were fertile ground for terror and violence. And I suggest that my colleague to this panel, Niram, will take it from here.
Yes, good evening. And I would like to start with maybe going a bit backwards in time and to a Danish explorer who came to the region in 1695. He was a Danish explorer called Reland, and he wrote a book which was published in 1744 in Utrecht, and in this book, which is very interesting, and it's called Palestina ex monumentis veteribus illustrata, there is no mention at all of a Palestinian population. There is no mention at all. There is no mention of a Palestinian heritage. There is no mention of a Palestinian nation. In 1695, when the Orientalist Danish Reland was in the region, he was not one of the places he visited had an Arabic name. The great majority of the names of the places were in Hebrew, in Greek, or in Latin. So the territory was sort of not full of people. It was very sparsely. Exactly. There was a Muslim minority, which was of mainly Bedouin origin, who lived in the center of the region. But this was the situation. This was the landscape that he encountered in 1695. So it's very important to understand this. Why am I talking about this period? because we have been hearing, and we continue to hear, that there was an original Palestinian population, and that this Palestinian population was the ethnic specific population of the region, starting from many centuries, from the beginning of the region. And this is a complete fake news. It's something which has no root in history. It has no root whatever in reality. And we need then to jump to another period. From 1695, I will arrive to the 19th century, to the 20th century, when there was the mandate for Palestine. So at the end of the First World War, so I'm talking about 1922, and the English, the British, wanted to call, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the region Palestine. And this was very disturbing for the Arabs, because the Arabs called the region Balad esh-Sham, the province of Syria. Or this was so a scandal for them, because the province of Damascus, sorry, Balad esh-Sham is the province of Damascus. Or Surya al-Janubiya, the south of Syria. So this was the concept they had of the region. The idea that it was that the British were going to call it again, to rename again, rebrand again the region with the name Palestine, was something that the Arabs themselves didn't like at all. So there were big protests in relation to this idea of changing the name of the region and call it Palestine. So this is very important in order to put the facts straight, and in order to understand that a Palestinian population is something which was completely fabricated, as Eretz said before, in a specific period of time, after in the 60s mainly. And it was fabricated exclusively for a political region in order to antagonize Zionism. And this is not something that has been said by those who are against Arabs or against Palestinians. It happened that in 1977, one of the hot brass of the PLO gave an interview to a Dutch magazine called Turo, in which he very clearly said that the Palestinians were a political invention, and they were created specifically in order to oppose Zionism. So this was not something that was, it was something that was very clearly stated, and had been very clearly stated by one of the hot brasses of the PLO in 1977. So and you can still find this interview if you go on internet. You can find the magazine Turov. It was, I don't know if it still exists, a Dutch magazine in that period, and this was very straightforward. So what we are facing is something which has been completely fabricated for a political reason. And we need to understand this very clearly. So when people talk of the native people of the region, the Palestinians, they were here before the Jews, they were there at the same time as the Jews, it's completely nonsense, complete total nonsense. They were not there before the Jews. Arabs were there, of course, but no, they were not called Palestinians, and they did not call themselves Palestinians, as I explained before. So it was important for me to start with this explorer who came to the region in 1695, and that then published this book in 1714, because it's a very clear document that we still can read, that we can still see, that clearly the discharged completely the idea of a Palestinian population that was pre-existing and that was there, had been there for many centuries. This is something, this is a pure fiction, a complete fiction. The interesting thing is that this fiction has become reality. And so I would like to take an example from Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. The beginning of the Communist Manifesto says, a ghost is hunting Europe, communism. A ghost is hunting Europe is Palestinism. And it has been hunting Europe for mostly 60 years, because it has been going on, this idea of the Palestinian people as oppressed people, as victims of the Zionists. It has been going on, started from the 1967 war, from the Six Days War. And it has been a very, very, very powerful narrative, which has conquered the mind and the souls of many people who really believe that in the region, Palestinians were the native people, and that the villains who came in suddenly, Zionists, Jews who came from Europe, seized grabbed their land and started to oppress them. And this victimization of the Palestinians is now something which is more or less common sense. We have been watching with dismay what has happened in Europe during the war in Gaza. We have watched with dismay what has happened in the American universities, where American students were going around shouting from Palestine, free from the river to the sea, wearing Palestinians, keffiyehs, insignias, and thinking that the Palestinians are the victims, that the Palestinians are the oppressed people. And this fits perfectly nowadays with the woke narrative of victimization, of general victimization, of oppression by white people against black people, by colonizers against indigenous people. So this is a very, very, very powerful tool, a very, very powerful narrative, and it has been strengthened, not weakened, in the last decades, and especially in the last decade, when the movement of wokeism has come up and has been very powerful, even if now it's not as powerful as it was before, but it's still alive and kicking. So it's very important to understand all of this and to put the facts right, because we need to make reference to facts and to history, and to understand that ideology is something which is completely against facts, and which is completely against reality. It's completely against history. So we need to have the records put straight.
Thank you, Niram. I just reaffirm what Niram has said. The term Palestinian itself was not a term of self-identification. It is an exonym, something imposed from outside. Up until very recently, the Arab population in the land of Israel didn't use this term. In fact, Golda Meir referred to herself as Palestinian in that period. It referred to an identification with a territory. It wasn't the result of an ethnogenesis, or that is, an organic birth or development of a people, a distinct people, that is. It's quite easy to falsify this notion of ancient Palestinian people, because there are ethnic groups who predate many of the recent migrants. For example, the Druze community, at no stage did they ever identify as Palestinians, and their presence is is more rooted here than in many of the Muslim population, which are to a great extent recent arrivals. Now, I'd like to we'll get back to this, and I'd like now to examine those actors who have come together to create, to fashion, as it were, this reality. Judiciary, academia, and so on and so forth. What is your understanding of this process here? Because it seems to me that all these actors now move in an almost organic way to undermine not only the Jewish presence in the land of Israel, the state of Israel, but also now in Europe itself. We see all the anti-Western movements, all the anti-Judeo-Christian sentiment coalesces around Palestinism. What are your views on that?
I'll try to pick it up from here. The fact is that recent wokeism and progression is breaking away from facts, breaking away from science, breaking away from real history, as I described it. And we are more and more engaged in politics of identities. As Niram said, if you're indigenous, then you're a victim, and vice versa. If you came from somewhere else and you're white, which most Israelis aren't, then you must be an oppressor and a colonizer. And which reminds me that just today I saw someone put a post on Facebook. I identify as an oyster, deal with it. So now we're supposed to accept anyone's feelings, not based on any facts, just because that person wants to.
Indeed,
So
that's very interesting. That's very interesting. In fact, I agree with what you say, and I believe at a certain point, when there is moral and intellectual collapse, we are creating a mental health problem, where you resist facts, where you find facts repugnant almost, and you show an incapacity to join the dots, to create a coherent picture of the world. What are your views, Niram? How would you?
My view. I completely agree with you. When there is a collapse, well, there is a line of a poem by the great Irish poet Yeats, and the poem is called "The Second Coming." And Yeats, at a certain point of the Second Coming, says, "When the center does not hold, things fall apart." So this is very, I think it's emblematic of the situation in which we are living now in the world in which we are living now, because there is no center, and there's the denial of a center of coherence, of logic, of rationality, of facts, of truth. We are in the era of post-truth. So, as Eric said before, each one of us can create his reality just by subjectivity. I feel something, so that is, you must accept what I feel. And truth as something outside the frame of our mind is something which is not important anymore. So this explains a lot of the success of wokeism, for example, of this narrative. And because facts, history, logic, all of this crumbles. It falls apart, because going back to Yeats, the center does not hold anymore. There is no center. There is nothing. There is just our feelings. There is just our impressions about things, our perception about things. And it's a it's a dismal situation. It's something in which is very difficult to live with, because this is another name for chaos. And when there is chaos, truth is not there anymore. So history is something which we can make up at our pleasure. And ideology and propaganda, they just are. They find the food to fill themselves with, and plenty of food, of course. So this is what I think, and I think it's more urgent than ever now to put things back where they belong to. And so, as I said before, we need to go back to science, to science in the sense of we need to stick to facts, because it's not true that there are only interpretations and no facts. There are facts and there are interpretations, but without facts, there can be no interpretation. So we need to know the history and to know the facts and to put the record straight, as I said before.
Excellent. Vitor, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking here. There is one agent that we haven't mentioned explicitly, but they are quite of a poison, at least in my estimation. And I'm going to name it here out loud, which I think are the NGOs, because they are somehow hidden. They have this effort of showing themselves with the best nature possible, but I think their intentions are not as positive as they might seem at the first sight, and they are all over the place. They are even covered as let's say, in the middle of students associations, in academia. They're basically everywhere, and they are funding things that are pernicious, and they're also being funded by pernicious people. So they are for sure an entity to be concerned with. Now, it seems that from the US now there is an orientation to target them and to make sure that they are compliant and not just making money out of poverty or causes that they are not particularly tackling. So how do you see the role of the NGOs in this particular issue of Palestine? Maybe Niram, if you can start.
Well, as you say, they are agents who are working with a lot of strength, with a lot of power that comes from money and funding that comes from Western nations, from Europe. A lot of money is coming from Europe, and we have them there inside Israel. These own NGOs, other organizations that give information to, for example, to Amnesty International. When Amnesty International published its report, according to which Israel is an apartheid state, where does it get all of its information from? It gets all of its information from the NGOs, mainly, which are mostly, if not all of them, very on the left, and they are completely absorbed and have completely they completely stick to the narrative of Palestinian oppression, of Palestinian victimization. They have been doing this for years, for many years. And B'Tselem, for example, is one of them. It's a very well known NGO in Israel. There are others, of course.
Breaking the silence. And also many of the demonstrations that were protesting the judicial reform, many of them are the result of foreign financing. We've got Erez back here. Erez, we were just talking about the NGOs. Okay, Niram. Sorry, I interrupted you, Niram. Go ahead, and then I'll pick up with
you gave me a good hook because I was going to maybe to talk about that, about the judiciary, all that happened in Israel, and we know for sure that there has been a lot of money coming in to finance and to support all of this, that went on in Israel past years against the judicial reform. There's a lot of cash. There are coming in. There are many actors playing on stage, and they have a very specific agenda. They have a very specific agenda, which is an anti-Israel agenda, which is an anti-Western agenda. So it will be interesting to talk about this, and we'd like Eretz to maybe to mention something and to talk about this topic, which is the topic, an important topic, of course.
Yes, please. Many of the what we call protest movements in Israel, which objected the legal reforms, were backed by international finance, mostly European, some American, and even, according to the Italian newspaper Politico, Qatari finance. That means
that's a surprise, Erez. That's a surprise.
Our worst enemies, the most extreme of Sunni Arab nations that finance terror and war and the extreme Islamists' causes, actually financed quasi-revolution in Israel against the elected government, against let's call it the mainstream and the majority of the population and voters again and again. And thereby they intervened in Israeli internal matters. And this caused a lot of distress among proponents and followers as well, because they incited a lot of feelings using sometimes fake news, fake facts, and they manipulated public opinion in Israel in such a way that there was there still is extreme polarization in Israel, because many powers or powerful elements in the Israel society, such as academia, such as the press, are highly influenced by those people, and are susceptible to woke claims such as, oh, poor Arabs, we disown them from their land, which never happened. They are quick to recognize the Palestinian people, though Palestinians are made of ethnic groups according to the lands they or their ancestors came from. There are different dialects of Arabic spoken in the quote-unquote Palestinian population. Some of them speak Egyptian Arab, which is Egyptian Arabic, which is much different from most other dialects in the region. They don't intermarry. The Arabs from the West Bank look down on the Arabs from Gaza. They are not made of the same skin. They have never been homogenic in nature, and accepting these claims, to me, almost resonates what Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Hitler, said, which is the greater and more coarse the lie, more people will believe it. And since we have millions, hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into Israel, promoting these claims, which are not fact-based, but fact-insinuated, let's call it, they have been able to destabilize Israel against itself. And this is very unfortunate, and we need to find a way to solve this, not only for ourselves, but for all the Western civilization, because the same processes exist in American universities, where they chant from the river to the sea and don't even know which river and which sea. They are very prevalent in what was until a few years ago mainstream press and communication, MSNBC, CNN, the BBC, which time after time makes quote unquote mistakes that misrepresent facts and humiliate and I'm looking for the right word, make Israel and Jews look guilty, like promoting the lie of famine in Gaza, like promoting the lie that Israel attacked El Khali hospital, which in fact suffered a hit of a Palestinian missile that misfired. The BBC was very quick to adopt the native or indigenous so-called opinion or position because of these beliefs that I mentioned before, that the Palestinians are indigenous and therefore are victims and therefore are right, regardless of what they did on October 7th, regardless of the fact that they have never had an anthem or a currency or any form of government, ever. Not once. Not once did the Palestinian, the people who considered themselves Palestinians or their ancestors have any form of central government. Force, yes. Gangs that rob people, especially people trying to move from city to city, yes, but not any other form of government. And still, as they are considered to be brown and black, and Israelis falsely are considered to be white, then automatically world public opinion goes with the so-called victims.
Yeah.
Vitor, anything?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's quite tricky because it seems that these so-called progressives, they flirt with dictatorships. They claim to be on the side of freedom, democracy, and all that, but they all end up embracing the worst dictators. Now, I don't know how much of that is conscious, but even if it's not, it's still a concern because they cannot make such a stand without knowing the people they are endorsing. I would like to get your thoughts on how much you think of that. It's done with awareness, or they are just living in plural.
Niram, do you want to take it up?
Well, yeah, yes. I would like to add something to what Eretz just said before about the anthropological, let's say, sociological nature of Arabs, of so-called Palestinians in Israel. And he said something which is very important. It's extremely important. I will answer. I will try to answer a bit of what Vitor said. We need to understand the ethnic differences in of Arab population, because we are talking, and this is not a derogatory word. We're talking about tribes. The Arab world is made by tribes. They are tribes. When Sadat gave an interview in 1978, I think, to Yediot Ahronot, which is the biggest, the largest paid newspaper in Israel, and he said there's only one Arab nation in the Middle East, and it is Egypt. And the interviewer asked him, and what are the others? They are tribes without a flag. Tribes with a flag, they said. They are tribes with a flag. And he was not derogatory. He was just describing reality. As I had said before, if a girl from Gaza wants to marry a boy from Hebron, it's a big problem. She cannot. It's impossible. There is a barrier. So when we are talking about Palestinian people, it's something which has been created artificially. There is no Palestinian people. There are different tribes, different and sub-tribes. Let's say, and sub-tribes, because if we just talk about Gaza, Gaza is a mosaic of different tribes and sub-tribes, of clans. This is the Arab reality. So in Europe, you hear about the Palestinian people as if they were talking about a whole coherent reality made of people who have the same ideas, who have the same objectives, the same aims, etc. It's not true. It's not. This has been all made up for political, ideological reason. I have finished about that, and I will briefly answer to what Vitor asked before. If people who adhere stick to the dictatorships, to the jihadists, to Hamas against Israel, do it consciously or unconsciously? Well, I think there is a lot of consciousness, there is a lot of intentionality, because a lot of these people really hate Israel. It's not just a question of being anti-Semitic. It's just a question of being against the West. These people have been indoctrinated for many, many years, for decades, that the West, that America, I'm talking about, for example, the United States, is evil. That it's the worst civilization that ever appeared on Earth is the Western civilization, and all of the rest is, all of the other people who are not Westerners are good people. And so this very Manichaean schematic idea of people, that good people are all on the part of non-being Westerners, and bad people are Westerners, it has penetrated very, very strongly the conscience, the soul of many people who chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, as I had said before, without even knowing what river they're talking about. They don't know they're talking about the Jordan. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what the sea is. But they just say this because they feel good, because they think that they are giving witnesses to the oppressed people, to those people who have been offended, to these people who are victims. So there's also a lot of idiocy. There's a lot of intentionality of hate, but there's also a lot of brainwashing, a lot of people who are just repeating these things because they are like they have stuck in their head, and they think they correspond to a reality outside the mind, which doesn't exist.
Indeed, that's very true. They have worked themselves up into a frenzy where they're not amenable to facts, to logic, to reason. That's very true. I'd like to draw people's attention to other victims of Palestinism, actually, which is the Christian community in the land of Israel. because people go on about ethnic cleansing, so on and so forth, but they pay very little attention to the destruction of the Christian communities in the land of Israel. The only places where the Christian population is increasing is within the pre-1967 borders. If we take, for example, Bethlehem, before Oslo, the Christian population of Bethlehem comprised approximately 80%. Now it has dwindled to 20%. And one doesn't hear any protest about that. So here we see a real, aside from the fact that the media suppress this information. But I think we should draw attention to this. And also, let me say, there are plenty of decent Muslims who understand that Israel is a country where they have rights, where they have a future, where they can develop economically, spiritually, academically, who are increasingly disengaging from the notion of Palestinism. And I think this is a promising note. But I think we should emphasize that Jewish people are not the only victims of Palestinism. We have the Christian minority here too, which has felt the full brunt of Palestinism. I'm privy to information about the vicissitudes to which they have been subjected in the various towns under the Palestinian Authority, and I think it's worth pressing this point home.
I have 2-3 comments. The first one is that we should not forget at least 2 other countries which were victims of Palestinism. The first one is Jordan, because in 1970, the Palestinian movements tried to take over Jordan. And as they were 80% of the population, they actually had a real good chance of succeeding. And powers, mainly Britain, supported the Bedouin king and was able to keep him in control. And what King Hussein, did was to go into Palestinian quote-unquote refugee camps, kill, I think the number was 3,100 people only in Aqaba, and lead to the flight of Palestinians, mainly PLO people, to Lebanon, where they proceeded to ruin Lebanon. They proceeded to create what was nicknamed the Fatah land, the land of the Palestinians, where a terror organization ruled, and they destabilized Lebanon. So the Palestinians have more victims than people care to think about. I think that the root cause of the Western Pavlovian reaction and Pavlovian support of Palestinians is the main root cause is the misunderstanding of culture. When you are educated to think that everybody is equal, that men can be women and women can be men, and men can be oysters, and they can do whatever they think, we lose sight of very basic human traits, which are beliefs and religion, and what can be encompassed as culture. The West doesn't understand the culture of anyone else. They went through centuries of war that culminated in the Second World War. More than 50 million people were lost, and now they think they have seen the light, and they can educate everyone else to be as virtuous as they are, quote unquote. And look at the American policy of invading Iraq with the intent of making it democratic. It's not in their DNA. The notion of statehood is not in their DNA. As Niram said, they live by clans. That is why Syria fell apart, Lebanon fell apart, Jordan almost fell apart, Yemen fell apart, Libya fell apart. All of these names and fictions couldn't hold the population that doesn't believe in them. And this misunderstanding of the notion of statehood and nationality, and the misunderstanding that someone can fabricate and lie in your face again and again and again, which is actually an Islamic methodology called taqiyya, which basically says lie as much as you want, put your hand on a stack of Quran books and keep on lying if it serves you as a Muslim. Keep lying to the infidels. It's not only not something wrong to do, but it is virtuous. And this is something the West doesn't understand. The deceit and the lies and the fabrications that are embedded in Muslim culture as something that is acceptable. Now, people might say that what I'm saying is derogative. It's the other way around. Those people who say, no, they are just the same as we are, they are condescending because they are basically saying, these people are stupid, they will come around. They won't come around. Their culture is ancient, not Palestinian nationality, but Islam has been around since the 7th century. It's a very, very heavy ship to turn around. It won't happen, especially because the ship doesn't want to turn around. They don't want to accept Western values such as truth, such as science, such as fairness, such as reciprocity. And let me explain briefly what I mean by reciprocity. When we Westerners, we do something for someone, we expect him to be grateful. We expect him to reward us somehow. Now, what happened in October 7th? People that one of them was buried just a few days ago. People that used to volunteer to take Arabs and Arab children to Israeli hospitals on their own expense were slaughtered by relatives and by the compatriots, if you like, of those same children, because there is no reciprocity in Islam. In Islam, there is force, there is blood, there is value in demeaning your opponent, and ignoring that is pretentious, is condescending, because someone who says I don't like, for example, the singer Roger Waters, which I value highly as an artist. He says, yes, they are exactly like me, and they are brown and you are white, and that is all there is to it. No history, no culture difference, culture gaps, no learning curve. So these people, instead of facing the gaps and the cultural challenges, they ignore them, thereby being very condescending and missing the whole point.
Vitor?
Yeah, I just want to say that, yeah, I think here in the West, we are a bit naive and we like to pretend that we know more than anyone else in the world, that we are driving civilization. But maybe it was the case, like, I don't know, maybe a decade ago or more. But one thing that comes across to me when every time I visit the Middle East, that you guys there have a better understanding of human interactions. That everything happens on the spot, and sometimes you cannot just go around. You need to get things sorted, and you need to be pragmatic. So I think there is a huge gap between, say, the fancy and sophisticated, or I'd rather say soft, uh, Europe and North America and the Middle East. And that's where I think Israelis stand out, because you guys are, in one hand, very much encyclopedical, but you are also action orientated, and maybe that's a lesson for us here in Europe. And I would like to get your thoughts, Eras, if you don't mind, if I keep the ball with you. Like, how do you guys perceive Europe, especially taking in consideration that we are somehow, I wouldn't say in a existential threat, but we are under pressure because of the demographic changes going on. So how is that viewed in Israel?
First of all, I can only speak for myself. I do feel and think and believe that European governments, as opposed to peoples, are being very much naive to the point of taking unreasonable risks. If a country welcomes refugees by the millions and ignores the fact that Sweden suffers from a plague of what they call black on white rapes, because Arabs will not rape other Arabs. They know what's coming from the brothers and fathers of the woman they would rape. They will know nothing. They know nothing will come to them from raping 15-year-old Swedish kids. But Sweden is willfully blind enough not to even keep statistics. So I feel that the governments, especially under the influence and the spirit of a very progressive EU, is taking huge risks. We are afraid for Europe. We are afraid for Europe because we know what happens when the minorities which don't identify with their national framework, we know what happens then. We know what happened. There is a famous book called Slavery, Terror, and Islam, which basically analyzes societies according to the percentage of Muslims that live in them. And the higher the percentage, the more crime, the more violence, the more terrorism. Don't forget that the people that attacked the Bataclan theater in Paris, they didn't come from the Middle East. They came from Belgium. Okay? A few years ago, someone committed a suicide bombing in a bar in Israel. That someone was a second-generation Pakistani from Leeds. He was never a Palestinian. But the higher the percentage of Muslims in Leeds, in parts of London where the police doesn't go into, in other places, as this percentage goes up, the prospect of losing control and losing the European identities and having their culture disintegrate grow exponentially. We see it, we suffered, we carry the scars. We carry the scars not only historically. October 7th, 2023, people came into Israel and slaughtered 1,200 people. And I want to tell the Europeans, wake up, open your eyes. It's coming your way. You already had one Bataclan. You already had ISIS attack Paris, which is a European capital. What else do you need to wake up?
You're very right. Europeans are sleepwalking into suicide. This is certainly very true. You mentioned the EU. The EU is, I believe, and it is proven to be, I believe, in the course of time, a pernicious organization financing terrorist organizations in Israel. Let's be perfectly frank. Not only does it finance NGOs, it also finances the Palestinian Authority, which has a pay-for-slay program. That is, terrorists who are imprisoned in Israel or people who commit suicide bombings, their families receive a stipend. And the great bulk of this money, or certainly a consistent part of this, is from the European Union. But never mind Israel. Europeans should be concerned about what the European Union is doing to Europe itself. And in fact, I firmly believe that the EU is anti-European civilization. Niram, what are your views?
I strongly agree on what I said before and on what you just said. It also goes back to this idea of victimization, of trying not to be offensive towards minorities and not to use words that might seem hard to hear, and labels, stigmas, and all this stuff, which has been used very skillfully by those who hate Europe and who hate Western civilization. And it has been very, very skillfully used. For example, let's think about Islamophobia. This is something which has been created. It has been created we gave to the people who hate us the weapon to use against us. So, I mean, it seems it's completely crazy, but it's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. We give our murderers the weapon with which they kill us. So we are talking about a very, very deep crisis, which is a crisis of civilization, it's a crisis of thought, it's a crisis of concept, and we need to make this very clear. And we must not stop saying things as they are to be said. Even if, of course, we will be accused of being Islamophobic, of being other things, or of being called names, but this is the price we must pay in order to say things, to speak the truth, and to stick to facts. So Europe is in a sort of oniric idea about reality, about what really goes on around us, and it's, as you said before, it's sleepwalking. Some years ago, Douglas Murray wrote a book called The Strange Death of Europe, which is a book I would like, which many people should read this book, because it talks about this euthanasia. We are going down the slope. We are going down the slope. Slowly, slowly, and then abruptly. So there's a famous phrase in a novel. I think it's Fiesta by Ernest Hemingway, where one of the characters says, "How you went bankrupt?" And the character answers, "Yes, it started slowly, and then all of a sudden." And so this can happen, and we need to try to find the way. If it's very difficult, to stop it will be the best thing, of course, but to make people aware that it's happening. And this is just something, a very important aim, to make people aware of what is going on.
Just a quick comment on that, Neil. Sorry, Mark. I'll pass to you just in a second. Just before I forgot, you mentioned one thing that I think is very alarming. So every time there is a terror attack in Europe, okay, the first concern of the authorities is to stop Islamophobia. What they should be very busy with is to identify the perpetrator. That's the first thing to do, not to be sure that there will be no wave of Islamophobia. And I'm not suggesting that Islamophobia is a good thing. Of course it's not. But the priority is to see who is the author of the crime and catch him and punish him badly. And if he happens to be Muslim, name it. Name it with all the words. Don't hesitate. But before they make it public, they are more interested in telling people not to be Islamophobic. So if that is not biased, what it is, for me, is just bad management. And whoever is in charge of the authorities, they should be fired and replaced, because they have no place to look after the safety of the citizens. They are useless. Marco.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I'm actually going to pick up on something which you said, which relates to our prize, golden sausage prize, because actually it involves Keir Starmer himself and his government, who tried to conceal the identity of the murderer of the children in Southport, England. And I think that exemplifies what we were talking about. So our good master sausage maker, the Right Honourable Keir Starmer, leads the way in this with his government. That's an excellent point. Niram, Erez, any comments?
Yes, two points, please. First one of the things that the West doesn't understand is that there is no concept of democracy in Muslim / Arab societies. All of them, without exception, are ruled by force, by brute force, including Egypt, where the current regime ousted the democratically elected Islamic regime that preceded it. Funny thing, but that it was the same.
It's quite
the same with Saddam Hussein, the same with Assad in Syria, and it's the same everywhere. So this is one huge misunderstanding on the part of the West, that the collective DNA is not democratic. And as I mentioned before, that's why the US failed so miserably in Iraqi freedom, because freedom is not a requirement. Force is a requirement. Honor is a requirement. Sometimes brutality is a requirement, such as in each and every Arab regime and government. That's one point. The other point, which stems from the first one, is that there is no concept of majority. Because if an individual doesn't count, be that individual a woman or a homosexual or someone from not a respected family, or someone from Gaza in the eyes of someone from Hebron, as you said, then this person doesn't count, and since there's no perception of democracy and power rules, force rules, then he who has the force is the quote-unquote leader, and he writes the rules of the game. Currently, in most Arab population in the Middle East, and even more in Europe, the powerful elements are those of extremist Islam. And extremist Islam, as it doesn't believe in statehood, it believes in itself, aims at establishing the reign of Islam worldwide. This is something that's very difficult for us Westerners, and especially Europeans, who talk about diversity, who talk about individual rights, who accept understandably when someone wants to be an oyster and be respected as an oyster. This creates a huge misunderstanding of the size of the Islamist threat, because as individuals, these people are very nice. They can be respectful to the elderly. They can speak nice. They can provide good service. But as a collective, it's a very different game.
Proposition,
because
yeah.
as a collective, they are led, they are motivated, they are manipulated by a force of extremists. So it doesn't matter if the vast majority of Muslim population is moderate, because of two things. First of all, majority doesn't count. It didn't count in Syria, where the minority ruled. It doesn't count in Egypt, where the secular minority rules. It didn't count in Iraq, where Saddam Hussein ruled through the bayonets of his followers. Anywhere in the Arab world. And the second reason that majority doesn't count is when you're talking about a 1.4 billion population, even 10% of terrorists, of extreme Muslims, of people who want to assert Islam over anything and everything, is a huge threat.
Niram, maybe?
Well, okay. I just want to add this. What Erez says is well, he said tough truth, because truth can be tough, and so truth is not always something likable, and that is one of the reasons why many people don't want to hear truth, because it doesn't correspond to their ideas, to their conceptions. And we have been framing the Middle East and in a way, the West has been framing the Middle East in a way which is completely, has nothing to do really with the Middle East. It's a complete misconception of, for example, of Muslim society. And if we don't understand really what we are talking about, we will be in complete incapability to face the problems that it creates. We will be we won't be able to have the instruments to detect and to find a way to, if we can, solve some problems. And there is another tough truth that I think must be said, which is in relation to what Erez just said before, is that in the Middle East, one of the things, and the thing that is most respected by Muslim society is force, is strength. You are respected really if you are strong. And if you are strong, you are someone who is at the top of the list. If you are strong and you behave strongly and you show strength and brutality. So what happened on the 7th of October was a sign which Hamas gave to the whole Muslim society. Not at all Muslims appreciated what I'm not saying this, of course, of what Hamas did, but many did, that they are the vanguard of this so-called resistance, and they are the jihad. They are the real core of jihadism, which is the spirit of combat Islam, and which is written very clearly in the Charter of Hamas. The Charter of Hamas is emblematic of the program that Hamas was going has acted very clearly and terribly on the 7th of October. The destruction of Jews and the idea that all of Israel is what in Arabic is called an Islamic waqf. Waqf is a term that means it's a property of Islam for all the generations, because the concept is that if Islam has been there before, it will always be an Islamic land forever and ever and ever, for all the generations. And this is not an idea which is a strange idea that comes from extremism, that comes from some maniacs. It's in the Quran. It has something that has been, it sticks to the tradition of traditional Islam, as jihad does. So we need to understand this very clearly, because otherwise we won't be able to face the true reality of the problem. And if we are unable and incapable of facing the true reality of the problem, we will be the victims. We will be those who will be dead tomorrow, not alive tomorrow. So it's a question of life and it's a question of death, and especially so in the Middle East, and especially so now, as it was before, of course. But it will also is something which is not only concerning Israel right now, as you said before, as I had said before, it's something, as the Martin said before, it's something that is concerning also Europe. And it will be a concern for Europe in the years to come. So we need to understand this very, very clearly. Otherwise, the problems at a certain stage will be absolutely unsolvable. There's one sentence, that in his masterpiece, the great English philosopher of the 16th century, Thomas Hobbes, in the Leviathan, writes, and he says, hell is truth that has not been seen. So we need to understand that if we see truth, and clearly we can have the antidote against hell, against violence, against brutality, but we need to see it before it happens.
Indeed.
I would like to add one thing. Niram is very right in describing the concept of waqf, which is sacred Muslim sacred Muslim land or soil. And if no European is, if Europeans are not worried enough about this concept, I would like to remind them that Spain and the Iberic Peninsula was under Muslim rules, and on the other side of Europe, the Ottomans came from the east and reached the gates of Vienna. This is what the Muslims consider theirs. Good luck, Europe.
Thank you. Vitor, would you like to wrap up our very
I think
interesting conversation with
we'll come to
Niram
an
and
end
Erez?
in a few minutes. I was just thinking, or trying to count how many times we say the word oyster in this conversation. Maybe we need to replace sausage with oyster. I don't know. We'll discuss it offline.
Sausage is much better.
They're two equally valid concepts which convey two distinct ideas.
Yeah. We'll discuss this offline and see what to be the dish or the trophy, whatever when they call it. Yeah,
oysters aren't kosher in any situation. So
yes,
a sausage at least
sausage is a
kosher.
Yes, we can turn them. We can turn them into kosher stuff. The sausage. So we'll probably stick to koshers, guys. I don't want to disappoint the audience, but for now, sausage will prevail. I think that's been a very, very insightful conversation. Your perspectives add a lot of knowledge to people. I would say that some of the audience, maybe they have thought, when they were trying to come up with their own conclusions, they have thought similar stuff to what you just said, but you verbalize what is in people's heads, I believe, at least in some of them, because I think one of the best benefits of podcasts is that we put in words what people are struggling to put it all together. So, and I think you had the merit to do that. So I want to say a massive thank you to you guys. The door is always open. So I think there are a lot of topics that we can cover that are within your scope. And it was a great conversation. I have the sensation that we could be here forever, and there's no better sign than that. The time just flew like we started a minute ago. So a huge thank you, and hope we can see you soon.
Thank you very much.
For the audience, I also want to add, so we'll be here again next Wednesday with the second sausage. Let's call it. There will be a second sausage.
Yes.
And next time, and I don't want to give out on people. But next time, please put on the comments who think will be next sausage. Not an oyster, it will be a sausage. So if you can think of someone, I know there are a lot of individuals.
Golden sausage.
Sorry, it's golden sausage. Yeah, who can qualify for that? It's a hard competition, but just think of, I don't know, 3 or 5 and try to think who was the sausage of the sausage among the tribes. So thank you very much, guys. We'll see each other next week, and I wish a very good rest of the evening for everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thanks.